What role does ego play in your life? Ego affects so much more than we realize, and that's been true for me as well. And I find that it's true for almost everyone. I've had nearly 200 guests on my podcast, and one of the questions that I've asked all of them is, what is the biggest challenge that you've ever had to overcome? The number one answer by far is themselves. Why? We tend to be our own biggest problem. If we could just get out of our own way, that is when we find success. So what does ego look like? Ego can look like a lot of different things. It can be that moment where you're driving along and someone cuts you off and you flash to road rage. And then a couple minutes later, you realize they didn't even know you existed. It wasn't about you at all. It can be the chase for perfectionism, and we get frustrated because we didn't do something quite right, and it comes out, and we just start lashing out a little bit. It can be that day where you've had 10 different things go wrong, and one person comes and says the last wrong thing to you, and that just explodes. It looks like a lot of different things. Here's what we do know, though. Ego is always covering insecurity, always. Ego is really just a symptom, but insecurity about an item could be about ourselves, but it could be just about a small thing that comes from our past. That insecurity, that is the root that we have to deal with. And how do we deal with it? We deal with it by responding first with compassion, not with anger or frustration. In other words, when you get upset at somebody else, when you flash to rage, it's not productive. You're not going anywhere positive. But if you pause and you're able to feel grateful, or you're able to feel compassion and understanding for whoever is having that moment, it changes your relationship. It changes how you engage with it, and it makes your day smoother and better. Here's a note that's really important. This should be true with you as well. In other words, be kind to yourself. Stop treating yourself poorly or being angry at yourself. Have compassion for the understanding of the things that have come up in your life. Second, solve the cause, not the symptom. You know how it is, anything in medical treatment, if we put a Band-Aid over it, that doesn't mean the thing's going to heal. But if we put the ointment on and we get the right treatment from the doctors, things are going to get better. Identify that cause. Look in your life or the person's life that you're trying to help and identify what is the insecurity? Where is it coming from? And how can we remove that thing, or how can we help that thing be eased so that it doesn't trigger the flashes of ego? Removing something that is blocking the track of our lives is a lot easier than building a whole new track. And I think so many of us, when we go along, we tend to want to throw out the baby with the bathwater. We tend to want to say, all right, well, that thing frustrates me, so I'm not going to deal with it. I'm just going to move on. It's easier instead to look and say, what is this thing that's getting in the way? How do I deal with it? How do I remove it? And when you're doing this with someone else, there are a couple of other considerations that come into play, because if you're doing it with yourself, it's almost always worth it. It's going to make you better. It's going to help you move forward. It's going to make your life easier and your relationships improve. But when you look at it with someone else, you've got to evaluate the time, the effort, and the benefit that can come from it and determine, is this worth it? Can I get in there and can I actually be of help? The truth is, you can influence others, but you can't change them. We can't change other people. We can only change ourselves. We're 100% responsible for us and a little bit responsible for others. But if we can do that influence and we can share that and they are eager for it, then it can make a huge difference. The last note about this is that you can't want it more than someone else does. I have tried throughout my life to help people so many times that don't want it, that aren't ready for it, that can't receive it. And in the end, that's just me kind of wailing at the wall and hoping that it will make a difference. But it doesn't. And I pour my energy and effort where it can't possibly do any good. So remember that you can't want it more than they do, but you do want to have a heart of compassion to engage and help wherever you can. I'm Dan McPherson, and I look forward to seeing you in the next sprint.